Welcome to the Along the Gravel Road podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Barona. I'm really excited to welcome you all back today. We have a few really exciting announcements to make before we jump right in. The first thing is that the You Aren't Alone Project, the nonprofit that brings you this podcast, we are hosting our, fourth annual live art event on May 3rd. It's a Friday this year, and so we're inviting artists from all different backgrounds to come out and just share your journey through, mental health, through life in general with the community. And so if you're interested, go to our website at youaren'taloneproject.com and you can check out more. Tickets are also available now. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, we are really excited. I'm really excited to welcome you today to the podcast. And our guest today is Ceisha James-Hayes. I don't know why every time I have trouble saying names on this thing, but here we are. And so today we're really going to touch on, which we'll actually kind of have back-to-back episodes on this a little bit, about, family dynamics and that impact that it has from generation to generation, particularly when there is mental illness involved or substance use or different trauma that has gone through, that's really passed down from family to family, and how you start to recognize those things and actually try and break those patterns for the next generation. So I'm really excited to talk to Ceisha today.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Giving me a space, to express. So that's great.
I think it's going to be really great. I think so many of the things that you and I got to discuss already, I'm just like, this is going to be really impactful for people to hear.
I really hope so.
Yeah. So if you want to start off, just introduce yourself a little bit.
Okay. Well, I was born in New Orleans. I left during Hurricane Katrina. I stayed in Baton Rouge for about 14, 15 years, and I moved back. I guess reflecting on things, I think my childhood has really played a big part in a lot of the trauma and a lot of the things that I've, had to process through the years. And I think growing up in New Orleans alone is just something that I think a lot of people who are from New Orleans can attest to, that we are exposed to a lot of stuff, like whether it's in school, whether it's in the streets, whether it's on the news, in the family dynamic. And I think we grow up a little bit faster than a lot of, other kids in different cities and in different cultures, because a lot of people think, oh, New Orleans is so much fun. It's so much, it's so happy and the food's great and it's Mardi Gras. But there's so much. I like to say it like this. People love the rhythm of New Orleans, but they don't know anything about the blues. So I grew up around a lot of the blues, and even though, it was rough, I think great character development happened through all of that. Sure. But a lot of that, I think, we were exposed to. We thought that was normal. I didn't really realize it wasn't normal until after Hurricane Katrina, when I moved to Baton Rouge, and we're on the news, and they said, oh, they had 2 murders this week. And my family's like, 2 murders is not bad for a week. We're used to a murder every day. So that is when I think I started to explore, like, hey, maybe I shouldn't have been exposed to the things I was exposed to, right, especially in the family dynamic and the violence and the drug addiction and the alcohol issues and just the overall trauma, every type of trauma you could imagine. And, sometimes that leads to secondhand trauma. So that's what I've just been exploring and trying to, weave into my healing journey of just understanding and processing that. So, that's where I'm at with things.
Yeah, it's so interesting because just like you said, there's been a lot of people who will share, something that they've been through that is sort of from the outside looking in, it's traumatic, that, yes, you experienced a trauma. But if it's something that you were just used to seeing, that you grew up with, it is very hard to really recognize it as a trauma initially until you're either outside of it or until you're able to get that sort of support or treatment or whatever it is to say, no, you did go through this. And, here's maybe some of the ways that it's now showing up in your life.
Exactly.
At what point, like when did you start to actually get sort of support for some of the things that you've been through, and like what did that process look like?
Well, I gotta give props to my mom, because my mom, she's been through a lot of trauma, in different areas, different parts of her life. She made it a point to get us therapy when we were younger. So when she was going through her divorce, she was like, okay, I'm gonna make you guys go to therapy so you can talk about your feelings. And I was kind of this kid that would act like I wasn't bothered by anything, because that was kind of I'm fine. Like, I'm fine. I'm not bothered. And I felt like if I showed that I was bothered, then things would get worse. Because growing up in a violent household that I grew up in, if you showed fear, it got worse. But if you act like you didn't care that this was happening, if you stood up to this person that was abusing, people in your family, like, that was better for me to just be this tough, strongest older daughter. And so first time I went to therapy, the therapist was like, she is completely just detached. Like, completely, like, and I was like, I'm fine. I don't care that they're getting divorced. I'm glad it's over. Not even processing. And my mom kind of was present enough to know, like, no, we need to keep up with it. So, on and off throughout my childhood, from like 13 on up, I was in and out of therapy. But then I got into therapy on my own when I started to realize that my relationships were suffering. Not in a way of like, more of in a way that I would take more, I'm not going to say abuse, but emotional, things I would just take them on and be fine about it and never express myself. And
You would be detached.
Detached and just allow people to just do things, and not even relationships, also in friendships and work, situations. And when I was in my career, like different career parts of my career, I would just take and take and take and take. And then I finally realized, like, oh, this may be a part of my conditioning. Like, I may have been low-key programmed to just accept the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And that's when I really got into therapy. I would say about maybe 2012-ish. I really jumped into therapy because I was in a very difficult relationship. And so I remember going to therapy, and we went to couples therapy first. And I remember the therapist, we went by ourselves, and we went together, and then we went by, we came back together, and the therapist was like, hey, you've been emotionally abused, talking to me. And I'm like, really? It's like, I didn't even realize that I was being emotionally abused. So I think that's when I really stuck to it. I've had different therapists on and off, but right now I'm in therapy right now. I love her. She's great. But I had to learn to prioritize intentional healing. And that means you got to do a lot of looks in the mirror.
Yeah.
And it means you have to be like, oh, I was toxic at one point. And I think for me, it was a lot of forgiving myself for a lot of stuff. And that's the hardest part about all of this, is learning how to forgive yourself, because I allowed behavior to occur. And so that was rough. And then it's like you just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And some days you be like, oh, I'm fine, I'm healed. And then you triggered. And I started to realize that my triggers started to be my family, especially my dad. Because my dad, he was addicted to drugs for about 30 years of my life. So, and that's because of his trauma. My dad had severe trauma from childhood, and he detached, blocked it out, and just so happens when my mom gave birth to me, all of it came back. I don't know if it was just his fatherly instincts to protect, brought back all of the things that he needs to protect me from. And so that brought all of the things that happened to him up, and he proceeded to, be addicted to crack, and for all those years, and trying to numb it out. He didn't want to face it, that ended up causing actual damage to his brain. And he's actually a paranoid schizophrenic now, also bipolar too. So all of that's going on. And then so I have a dad that I'm growing up with, even though he's not in the house with me. I have a father that has the emotional intelligence of an 8-year-old. And so I'm a child, and I'm dealing with a father who, he's like, oh, yeah, baby girl, you going to take care of me when you get older. You going to make sure you do this. You going to make sure that. You love your daddy, right, no matter what. And that is abusive, not realizing that. And realizing that, oh, this is why I tended to gravitate towards men who I need to take care of. So, like, the deeper you go, it's like you go a little deeper, and you got to sit for a second in that and be like, okay, I just figured out, oh, wow, this is why I was attracted to this type of guy. Okay, let me sit for this for a second. And then you have to process getting out of victim mentality of being like, oh, this happened to me. And then I have to be like, okay, this happened, but this doesn't define me. So it's so many steps. And I understand why people give up. I'm not gonna sit up here and say it's easy, because it's a lot of self-evaluation. It's a lot of just digging. And it's a lot of doing the work without the people that you need to do the work with you.
Exactly.
because I feel like we're in therapy because of people that need to be in therapy or not in therapy.
Yeah.
Like, I wish some of my people go to therapy. Please, I give y'all, come on, we can come together. But
Well, just like you said with your dad, that
Yes.
right, he is essentially this 8-year-old child who, first experienced this trauma and was abused. And because he just used substances and now suffers from all these mental illnesses, he never went back and healed that inner child in order to move on to the next step of growth in his life. So he's stuck there.
Yeah.
You just went back and started healing all these parts of yourself, but that means you also have to go and meet them where they were.
yes, exactly.
And damn, that hurts sometimes, and that
really
is
is.
hard.
It's a lot of grace, though.
Oh, so much.
And I wouldn't have had grace for him if I would not have gone to therapy, because my therapist is one who said, well, hey, this is why he acts like this, because he's really an 8-year-old right now. And her telling me that is why sometimes I'm like, okay, he's acting up right now. But I look at him and I'm like, he's literally 8. So you can't be upset. You know, if an 8-year-old child is throwing a temper tantrum, would you really be mad at them? It's like, no. But you also have to be careful, because you can't give them too much of like, I'm going to continue to allow this. You just have to establish boundaries, which is hard, especially for your parents.
Right.
So
this is still the person that was supposed to take care of you and didn't in a lot of ways, but you can sort of, I don't want to say detach, because that's not necessarily that's what you were doing before, but you can separate those two things now and say, yes, I should have had a father that was able to care for me, and I can also understand that his experiences, his trauma is why he is the way he is, and I can't fully blame him for that. You know, to be able to have both of those things be true at the same time can kind of take away this power that it had over you to say, oh, I have to take care of this person. This is now my responsibility. Yes. When really, at this point, you understand it, but it's still not your responsibility.
But that's hard to work through, because I'm my dad's only child. So that's really hard to work through, because my family, I love them, but they tend to be like, well, you're all he has, so you have to do this, and you have to make sure you take care of him, and you have to make sure this. And that's part of me that's like, I was never allowed to be a child, though. Yeah. And this was happening way before I got here. And now y'all are putting this on me to fix this, which I don't have the space for, honestly. I don't have the capacity.
No.
But even loving myself enough to say, oh, no, I used to just run myself ragged. I used to be looking for housing for him. I used to try to get him into rehab. I've actually had my dad committed before. I used to run myself. And I finally was like, no, I really, for me to be in this generation, I have to prioritize my own self. Yeah. You know, and that's not being selfish. You know, I think that's a thin line, but it's really not being selfish. And I think we've been programmed, I guess, with the guilt of like just having family. It's like, okay, but that's family, that's blood, no matter what. You have to do that. I think that also has created a lot of mental issues.
Absolutely.
Like mental health issues.
And that's part of that generational trauma. If you're still stuck in that loop of like, oh, I'm now responsible for these people, how are you moving forward? How are you setting yourself up for a better future for your children and future generations when you're stuck taking care of the past?
And that's heavy. That's a very heavy. And I also realized that's why I hadn't had children yet. Because I'm like, how? I'm taking care of, you know, and how am I going to have children? And how am I going to have the space to juggle that? And so I finally reached the point of like, you know what, this is not for me. And, you know, but it's hard because I want to pull other family members with me. Yeah. Because that's a stage too of like, oh, I got to save. Oh, I woke up and this is, I'm happier here. And I do this and I get my sleep now and I drink water and I do this and I meditate and I want to pull them with me. But realizing that their alarm clock's going to go off when it's time for their alarm clock to go off. Yeah. That's also a big thing to drop. And it's stages to it, you know, because I also have a brother who is paranoid schizophrenic. We think his was also drug-induced, you know, and because he started doing drugs at a very young age. Yeah. In a family that used drugs to numb things, and you have to realize, like, even being an older sister and not protecting him from that, like, not, like, seeing, like, hey, everybody's doing drugs right now, and me just being like, oh, you know, he's all right, you know, he's doing his thing, and not realizing that was actually damaging his brain. So that's something I've dealt with too, of like, could I have been a better older sister at this time of my life and been, a better role model of, hey, don't hang out with these people, don't, but I didn't. And that's something that was a whole 6-month therapy situation I had to go through to release that. But it's all a part of it. And I think the family dynamics, also people don't realize that. I say this all the time. I would rather my family and my parents be mentally stable than them be millionaires.
Yeah.
Because like money really doesn't matter when it comes to your foundation as a person and how you move through the world. Because I didn't realize I had anxiety since I was a child. If the phone rings too late at night, I'm worried something's happened because my dad was on the streets.
Because something was happening, yeah.
Something was like, okay, well, I'm scared. Like, oh, why is someone calling this late? Like, what? As a child, why am I even thinking about, oh, where's my dad? Is he okay? Has anyone seen him in months? Or, or even crime in New Orleans. I have a few even that were killed at night.
Yeah.
So when the phone rings at night, someone's gotten killed. To this day, my mom, if she calls me back to back, I'm like, Mom, that triggers me a little bit.
Yep.
Please don't call me more than once. If you're just asking me how to program Netflix on your TV, like, and she's like, and she understands that. I'm able to say, hey, Mom, that bothers me a little bit, and she understands where that's coming from. But me having the space and to I guess express my boundaries is a big deal too. So, but
yeah, that's huge. And it's like, just with the anxiety, maybe that probably is something that, the phone rings, that might always be something internally where it's a trigger. But just like you were saying, you start to recognize those triggers, and you can start to take away some of its power.
Yeah.
And that way the anxiety isn't going to last the full day. It happens in that moment.
And you release.
Recognize it. You let it go.
You release it.
But, and then, when you're talking about your brother and being in that situation and having to go back and look at, what you could have done differently. You still have to recognize that you were a child, and you were still that child that was trying to take care of everyone else and started to detach because it was safer.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, it was safer.
It really was. And even my behavior in my 20s, I was partying all the time. Because I didn't like being the person having to be in charge.
Yeah.
So when I would go out with my friends saw a completely different side of me. They're like,
you finally got to just let that
go be myself, and I overdid it, a little bit. I was LSU, had a lot of fun, but but like even then I look back and I'm like, I'm glad that I didn't, it didn't spiral, because it could have spiraled a little bit. I could have fallen into the same notions as everybody else and being, but realizing that why I did that helps me be like, okay, I'm going to show my past self grace. And
yes, because some of that, you start to unravel things, and you start to go back and you recognize that you were, these patterns that you were falling into, how dangerous they were, and how kind of there's shame there, There's shame, even with the understanding that there was some underlying things that were going on that really impacted the decisions you were making. That shame is still heavy. And so to be able to say, I take ownership over the decisions I made and I forgive you, that moment for me was pretty intense. And it's still happening. I mean, there's so many things that I still have to go back and say, like, I still feel that shame around, and to say, okay, feel it and then let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go, because you've grown from that, but it gives me a lot more empathy, towards others who I can see making those same patterns. And just like you said, you want to be like, don't do it, but people have to, while you can show them, like, model, this behavior, this changed behavior, people have to come to those decisions on their own.
They have to. And that's the rough part, watching it. Like, watching this, I forgot what they call it. It's not character development, but it's like you're watching, it's like, oh, I know what's going to happen here. It's like, okay, but you have to go through it, and it's rough. But, I have a younger brother. I think I've been better with him. I think that's how I've been able to kind of healed even. You know, my baby brother, you know, he's 12 years younger than me. So my other brother, we were friends. Like, oh, you my homie. But my baby brother, I'm like, hold up. Let me try to, like, guide you a little bit better. You know, and I think that's how I've learned from it. Even though that's not really my dad always says, it's not my jacket to wear. You know, like, he's always, my dad is he doesn't hold stuff. So if it has nothing to do with him, he's like, that's not my jacket to wear. So I tend to be like, you know what, that's not even my jacket to wear. So, you know, that's some things that I've gotten from my dad, because he goes in and out. He goes in and out of things. Like right now, he's going through a lot right now, but he's sober, so that's great.
Okay.
But I think even my dad has always been very raw and not treating me as a child. Like, even when I talk about him, I should be able to. I'm very raw with it. Like, I'm just like, oh yeah, my dad was on crack.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, ooh, I should. But
people are pretty taken aback by
like,
when you
oh,
start sharing,
but for me,
you,
I'm just like, oh, that's, but
that was sort of a normal everyday
everything. But the more polished thing would be my dad suffered from substance abuse, but I'm not even so raw with it, and he's still raw to this day, and I don't know if that's helped me. But me knowing what was going on was great, I think. Not details, but me knowing and not just, being like, why is he never here? And why? Me knowing, okay, he's suffering with something was really important, I think.
Of course.
Because I think sometimes parents try to hide a little bit too much, and sometimes they give a little bit, too much information. But I think finding that balance is really important, too, when it comes to just the dynamics in family and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting with your younger brother to sort of be that person for him a little bit. It's kind of what you were talking about. It's kind of like, okay, now you're starting to take care of the next generation. So there's a little bit of that. It's not so much, oh, this is a responsibility I have and that I have to do. It's separate from that. Now it's like, I've gone through this healing journey. Now I can impart that on this next generation. How can I do that?
Yes, and which I think is important. Like, that's the only way we could be a ladder. Like, I help my brother with resumes and all emails, drafting emails and stuff like that's cool. But I think the biggest thing I've gotten from helping my youngest brother is I explain things to him. Because, we have the same mother. So sometimes Mom may have a bad off day, or she's a little bit down. She suffers a little bit with her mental health. And I'll call him up. I said, hey, Mom probably yelled at you because she's overstimulated. She probably yelled because there's this going on, Because I never want him to internalize.
Yeah.
And I think me internalizing for most of my life is what distracted me, kind of stunted my growth a little bit, when it came to just my career, relationships, anything. I always internalized a lot because no one explained what was going on. When Mom would come home and she's upset and, she goes in her room and closes the door, you're like, well, what did I do wrong?
Yep.
And I think this generation does a better job of being like, Mom comes in, hey, I had a rough day at work. I'm going to go in my room and decompress for 30 minutes. That simple little thing right there, I think our generation has gotten better with doing that. And my mom has gotten better. My mom explains herself more because she's no longer in survival mode. Yeah. She's not trying to, take care of 3 kids on her own, pay all the bills, braces, cars, private school. Like, being in that mode like that for years, you just, whoop, I got to get up, go to work, get up, go to work, get up, go to work. And I think, especially in Black families, a lot of the mothers, people don't realize that, anxiety and depression shows up as agitation sometimes. Or shows up as them just simply being quiet. So I think maybe exploring that more in our families, will give more grace to the mothers, especially when they go like, Mom's got a lot going on. And I, now that I'm older, I'm able to reflect back and be like, wow, she wasn't upset. She had just worked 12 hours that day. Because if I go to work and I work 12 hours, I'm coming straight home and I'm going to sleep. I don't have any kids in the house where I got to help with homework, baths, dinner.
And I know I'm more agitated. I know I'm like, any little thing is going to get to me.
Anything's going to, so.
And I'm now a person who can recognize that I know that it's not personal to whoever happens to I interact with at that point. But a child doesn't understand that.
And then that creates walking on eggshells and a little bit of anxiety. And it's, but I think I know now. So when I do have my children, I'm be more aware and more intentional. with just, hey, if I'm having a rough day, let me sit in the car a little bit longer. Just being aware, I think, would help a lot. Especially in families, because that's where you're molded. It's like nature versus nurture. Like, you're molded at home. You're gonna go out and you're gonna have experiences out in the world. But one thing I never want my children to go out into the world is looking for, like, love and acceptance and be able to express themselves. Like, you should be comfortable at home. There should be no eggshells on the floor.
That should be the foundation.
That should be, like, they're gonna be able to walk. So but I'm glad that I did go through all of that. Because I understand. Like, I'm able to, like, absorb, process it, and be like, okay, this has nothing to do with me. Even at work, I have people at work that they have a rough day, and I'm just able to look at them and be like, they may have had a rough day at home. You don't know what's going on. You don't know if
that perspective shift is huge.
Yeah, like, that has nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. So
how have you noticed that now that you're really in this place of moving towards healing? How have you noticed that your relationships have changed outside of just the familial relationships?
I actually had to shift away from a few people.
Yeah.
Which was rough, because I was friends with them for, like, a really long time, and no arguments, nothing like that.
Yeah.
But I think when I really stepped into who I really am, the person that I used to be wasn't expressive, didn't really express my boundaries, didn't really speak on what made me comfortable, what made me uncomfortable, whether it be conversations or situations. And I think once I started to do that, what ended up happening with me was I got really protective of myself. And me being protective of myself, I became protective of my past selves. So then I had to struggle through remembering things that happened in the past and being like, wow, Ceisha, why didn't you react differently to that situation? And so I beat myself up I'm going to say about 3 years. This has been about 3 years. I went through this phase of, like, reflecting and being like, wow, that was really wrong that happened. And I wasn't mad at the people at all. I was more upset with myself. Yeah. So, but I think it came across to them as I was upset with them.
Yeah.
And even though, they weren't doing those things, now I just kind of realized we weren't aligned as people. And that's hard to distance yourself from people you've been, really close with, when you realize maybe you're not aligned as you thought you were.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't really in my true self, because I was operating out of this space that I wasn't really expressing what I needed from these relationships, because I was programmed to always give and give and give and give and give and show grace, but I wasn't really receiving.
Yeah.
So that was rough. But I also have to be a little careful too, because I'm so protective of myself and my peace. I don't really have a lot of, capacity for red flags in any situation.
Right.
Coworkers, friends, family, like, relationships, like, I have to find balance. That's where I'm at now, of being like, oh, that's a red flag, and running. That's usually what I do. Like, that's a red flag, I'm out.
Done, yeah.
I have to be like, okay, this is a red flag, but maybe, talk to them and see why. What's the why of this? And are they aware of this, that they're doing this, and express how you feel. And if they don't, react or, shift a little bit, then maybe you can take it from there. But it was literally, my brain would just be like, red flag, I'm out. And I'm like, okay, that's not healthy either.
Yeah, gosh, that balance is...
That balance is
tough.
Yeah, because...
It's tough to find.
Because I'm one of those people, you can do something, and I'll be like, hey, I don't like that you did that. And if you do it again, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
It's those protective factors.
It's protective, but I need to. Yeah. There was a time
that grace you're now giving yourself
I need to be extended. I need to extend it a little bit, but because I know there was a time that I probably red flag all over. I was a walking red flag.
Yeah. What
if the people that were in my life would have been like, "Oh, red flag, bye." What would it have done to me? So I'm in that space. Of course, yeah, I have a lot of compassion. I compromise. I do all of that, but I'm working on not running,
like especially when it comes to the people that you're in those real impactful relationships.
I have great friends. I have great friends, great family, but I think new people.
Yeah,
kind of like let me make sure you're not a bully. Let me make sure, because I've dealt with a lot of bullies in the past in my
too.
life, in different parts, like different types of relationships.
Yeah.
So any type of, that type of a behavior, I tend to, let me protect myself. So, or any, or a narcissist, or, any type of selfishness, I run. So that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, and that balance of like trusting that gut feeling, but also understanding that sometimes that gut feeling is based on trauma and not the actual situation at hand.
Yes.
Which can, that I think that's a big part of this process too, is starting to understand the difference between those two things. Is this internal,
Is it me, or is it,
Exactly.
make sure it's not me.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of processing.
Yes.
I do a lot of processing, I let people be who they are. I don't try to, but then I go and I process and I said, okay, do I feel safe with this person?
Yes, that's an important.
And if I can say yes, then we're good.
That's great.
If I say no, intuition, I gotta go. And I think everyone should have that right to be like, if I don't feel safe in this space with this person, in situation or conversation or anything, get out of there.
No, definitely. And a part of you growing up in these environments, you have developed this intuition that is that you should absolutely trust, because you have been through things that have set you up. Because there's, you said if you wouldn't have gone through all of these things, you may not be the person you are today. And so being able to look back too on that and say, I can both say like what I've learned from it and what it created for me, and what impact that had on who I am in a positive way, and the things I went through that were that I should not have ever gone through. That's
part of it too. Like, I shouldn't even been through that. That's a big part of it too, and being like, but that's it's all right. And I think a lot of times, because I always knew about my family's trauma. Like, my mom would tell me, this happened, this happened, this happened, and I'd be processing as a 5-year-old, like, what? And so when I would go through things, I would often be like, well, it's not as bad as that person's. So that is why that was a big part of it, of like, oh, this happened to me, but it's not as bad as my mom, or it's not as bad as my dad, or my grandmothers, or my aunts. And that was a big one. And I think my current therapist, because I talked to her about some stuff, and she was just like, this happened to you? And I'm like, yeah, but it's not that bad. And she's like, Ceisha, that is mortifying. And I had to take a step back and be like, really? Like, I didn't really think it was that bad. And I had to allow myself, first, before you heal, you have to feel. So that wasn't fun, going, like, recalling, things that have happened, things that were said to me. Like, I had a lot of emotional abuse. And recalling the things that were said, and then having to be like, oh, that was really worse than I thought it was. But allowing myself to be in that space is what led to me healing, because, my pain matters too. So that was really a big part of it too, because I grew up being like, let me take care of these people because all this happened to them.
Right. Not and pushing aside what was like, happening to you right now.
I don't care. That's not that bad. Like, oh, I'm just going through that. That's not that bad. Like, oh, this could have been worse. But yeah, so that was a big one. And oftentimes you can't talk to with your family, because they don't, they're gonna have their guilt and their shame of, oh, wow, I didn't realize that you took it like that. I was just trying to protect you from, and I appreciate that, of informing me to protect me, but it ended up being, I was informed, and then I tended to belittle things that happened to me because it wasn't as extreme as what happened to them.
They were sharing with you. Yeah, and in a situation like that, you're kind of going back, and you're probably, as much as you do want to express that was painful for you to your family. Yeah. And maybe that's not necessary.
It's not.
Because that's only going to cause more
additional pain. I don't even need to do it. No, I'm not bothered by it at all. I'm not detached. Don't worry.
Right. But, no, that's boundaries.
Like, I'm just like, I don't even need to go tell people. Boundaries. Like, I don't even, when I realized that I didn't need to have conversations with people about that was a big one.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things that happened that I thought, I can't move forward until I have I get an apology. Now I'm like, I don't care. Yeah. If you can apologize. If you do, you don't. Because some people don't even realize it. But when I got to that part of my life where I was like, I don't even need you to apologize to me. Yeah. But I I had to accept and be honest and be like, well, dang, I've been waiting for one all these years. Oh, I was like, oh, this is why I haven't let this go from this person. It's because I was waiting for them to realize what they did and then come back, still me trying to control it.
Yeah.
Relinquish control.
And the way it was impacting your relationship moving forward without even
romantic relationships. They would do things. Someone would like, my ex would like do something and he would apologize. And I would be like, bring it back up because I was not over it. Like, so it would be
and you were waiting for those. That was all the apologies that you still needed. And so it was never going to be enough.
Like, but why did you do that? Like, I need you to explain to me, why did you do that? I know you said you were sorry, but why did you do it? Because I needed to control that part too. I don't even need to understand why anymore.
Right.
Because they don't know either.
That's a them problem.
They don't even know why they did it either.
No, probably not.
They need to go to therapy.
Right. Right.
They don't know why they did it either. So when you realize people just do stuff and it has nothing to do with you, people treat you how they feel about themselves.
Yep.
So if they don't feel too great about themselves, they're going to treat you like that.
Yeah, I think that's another important thing that we can impart, in raising kids and the people around us, the younger people around us, is that. Because, God, growing up, like, the amount of times that I put other people's stuff and took it upon myself, like, that caused a lot of that. And I was already suffering from anxiety and depression. So, like, taking all of that in and turning it into these, like, just my own insecurities. And that's another thing, like, feeling like, oh, I allowed those things to make me insecure. And then it's like you were a child.
But there's layers.
You didn't know any better.
You're like when you know what helped me a lot? I worked at a school, and I would see the kids. I would see like a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 8-year-old, and when I would think back to things that that I did at that age, and I would look at the kid, and I'm like, why are you beating yourself up about something that happened when you were 8?
Right.
Like, look at them.
You've literally only been on this planet for 8 years.
Like, they don't even, so that is big too. And I think another thing that I think I got from, just realizing things is that a lot of my problem was that I thought that my worth came from how I showed up for other people.
Yeah.
Like, I thought, oh, I'm tired, I'm really exhausted, but I'm going to make sure I make it to this baby shower. Oh, I really don't have it to give, but I'm going to give my last to this person because this is how I show, this is how I prove my worth.
This is what makes me worthy of this.
And that came from always having to take care of other people growing up. And that's a big one, too, of, like, my worth doesn't have anything to do with what I do for other people.
No.
Nothing. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, why do I feel like to show my love and to show that I'm worthy of love, I have to do the most. No.
Not anymore?
No, I don't really. No, if I can't make it, I can't make it. If I can't make your birthday dinner and you're a friend of mine and you don't understand that I'm exhausted, I worked 15 hours today and this happened and this happened, hopefully we've created a foundation where it's not intentional, anything to do with you. I'm just exhausted. If the friendship ends because of that, I'm okay. Like, that's what you have to get, because society has put so many, requirements on what you have to do to, like, be in relationships with people. And that has created a lot of mental health issues, too.
So many. The
stress, the anxiety of, oh, they're going to think I don't love them if I don't do this.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't. Yeah. There's definitely been these moments, especially more recently, starting to realize that, like, I can't be everything to everyone, and each person can't be everything to me, and starting to, like, both let go of anything that I'm putting on these other people, and also for myself be like, I if this isn't serving me, I'm not taking care of myself in this moment, then all I can do right now is then make sure that I'm filling my own cup, because that there's nothing else I can do right now. And to have people in your life understand that it first comes with being able to voice that and like share that. And for a lot of us, we don't do it because we're so afraid of what could happen.
Yeah, like,
when really, if we started to open up those conversations to make it a safe space where not only can I share that I am drained, I'm exhausted, that I don't have the energy for this right now. And you know, but I love you and I care about you. But we also give other people the space to do the same. It really does. It builds like such strong friendships and relationships that can sustain some difficult stuff.
And take the weight off.
God, yeah, it's freeing. It's like
take it off.
Just like sigh of relief to know that like it doesn't, like if I need a second, I know that the people in my life respect that and will give it to me.
Sometimes you can't talk every day.
Sometimes
you don't have the space to just sit on the phone. Mm-hmm. And to have friends who understand that's what I think is important. Also, we seek that. We seek and we become that.
Yeah.
Like, my friends right now, one of my best friends, I haven't talked to her in like 3 days because she's got a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. I don't need this girl. Hit me up when you're done. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no pressure.
There's none.
Like, just be. Like, that is very important.
There's all, I'll text somebody I don't hear back from in a couple of days, and I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you don't have to apologize for that. It is just a text message. And this was not that important. And then I've started to find myself, like, I'll go to apologize or like, please don't hate me for this. And then I'm like,
no. Don't apologize.
No.
Don't apologize. No. That's a big thing, too, because I used to apologize a lot.
Oh, gosh.
Started in childhood. I'm sorry.
Oh.
And I said, now I have, like, I don't do it. If I haven't intentionally hurt you.
Right.
I'm not going to apologize.
Right.
If I haven't, like, inconvenienced you or anything, like, me just missing your text, I'm not going to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of self-love of, like, no, I'm not going to. Why would I do that?
Yeah, and shifting that perspective of I can be sorry that something occurred,
yes,
but I'm moving that blame from myself.
Yeah, just it's a general.
I'm not sorry about in this situation we're all understanding the fact that I wish that wouldn't have happened, but that doesn't mean that I'm taking any responsibility for it because a lot of times it is out of my control and it wasn't something I intentionally wanted to skip. But whatever it is.
Like, yeah. But that starts in families, though.
Absolutely.
Like, I've seen some of my friends who grew up in families that were, like, very relaxed. Like, oh, whatever. Do whatever. Like, there's no pressure. Yeah. And they are just the most free-spirited, like, oh, yeah, whatever. Mm-hmm. This is fine. I'll show up this. And I noticed the kids that grew up in rigid households or or in households they had to kind of have some type of control or they are so hard on themselves.
Always.
That brings it back to why it's important
exactly
in the house to create that foundation for your child.
Yes.
Like, I saw something today. I forgot who said this. I wish I can give. I think it was Toni Morrison, but I'm not sure. I don't want to misquote the wrong person, but she was like, do you look at when your kids come in the room, do your eyes light up? And a lot of parents are like, no, I'm checking their shoelaces. I'm checking to make sure their shirt's tucked in. I'm checking to make sure they brush their hair. I'm checking to make sure they brush their teeth. And kids growing up in critical environments like that.
See that.
That's the beginning of depression, anxiety, overstimulation. Like, that is where it truly begins. And that is kind of where a lot of mental health issues start, too, of like, oh, I'm anxious. Like, is everything go good? And that's a big part of it, too, I think. And I just hope, I think we have there's hope for the future.
Yeah.
When it comes to us being more like present parents and then the next generation. Each generation is going to get better.
And, it's not to say that as a parent, you're already under a great deal of stress, that some things you are not going to do perfect. Yeah. But to just recognize that, this is like intentionally, this is a situation where, 9 times out of 10, I'm acting in this way. I could, it should be that the norm is that my eyes light up when I see my child. However, sometimes I'm overstimulated and I may be like, get your shoes on. Like, we're not even. And that's okay too. But it's really about having that awareness to be able to know that all of these things will have an impact, and that, as much of the time as you can to really focus on, are we being open and honest about what we're feeling and how that's not their fault? Are we making sure that they can see that they're in a safe space as more often than not? And those things will make a huge impact.
Yeah.
It's proven. It really, it's evidence-based.
Yes.
And
check the numbers.
The
studies, all of that.
Yeah. And this generation, I mean, those core beliefs that you develop as a child that continue to come up for you throughout your life, it starts with some of those small things. Sometimes it starts with really traumatic experience, but that's even something to recognize too, that you don't have to have necessarily grown up in an unsafe environment for those core beliefs and those anxiety symptoms and the depression to start building over small things. For me, I grew up with an identical twin sister.
What?
And so that right? That comparison of like always, and it wasn't intentional, but there were adults that would sit there and pick us apart and compare us. And, I don't know if it happened as much in my household, but I just know that like a big chunk of my life was being compared to another individual. And I now know like how much that impacted me. That's not something anyone would consider traumatic. However, that did form these beliefs in myself that, that maybe that I'm never good enough, that, that I should be this or that. And that starts at childhood.
It does. I as you say it, though, I remember going to school with twins, and we would, that twin does this and this twin, like,
People still, we'll be standing next to each other, and they'll literally start picking, like, things that...
I never thought about that. Wow.
And most people don't. So that is one thing. When someone's like, I'm having identical twins, I'm like, let me tell you some things to watch out for. But it's just like that. It's just like, you don't know what you don't know.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
you look.
That's been that's coming up in therapy for sure.
Twins from middle school, like, hey y'all.
Yeah.
I never thought about that, and now I see now why a lot of twins, when they get older, they make sure their identities are completely different. Mm-hmm. Like they look like different hair colors, different styles.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That might be an episode for another day.
Yeah, I'm gonna go process this and Google all kind of stuff.
Please share what you find, because
it's wild.
Oh, but okay. Well, we won't take too much away from that. I'm like that we could dig into that all day. But as we really wrap up here, I think so much of the things that you shared really focus in on how you took this generational trauma and how you are now doing the work so that you can change that for your children and for the future. Is there if there was really one thing that people were to take away from this episode, if you could sum up something, or if there's anything else that you really want to make sure people know, what would that be?
I guess the biggest thing for me is, I know everybody's focused on getting their 401k together, getting their investments together, getting their career together, and creating a great financial, stable environment for their children. I think is way more important to do the work internally on yourself.
Yes.
I'm not saying healing is like going to be linear and it's over. I'm healed and cool. I checked it off. I checked my box. I think be more intentional in exploring yourself on why you do things, because you know yourself. You look in the mirror every day. You know yourself. Be honest with yourself. Be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Be transparent as possible, because your kids are going to be the ones who are going to get that product from you. Like, you can go to work and be the best employee you can be. You can go and be the best friend, the best, all of this. But when you come home, your kid's going to get the raw version of you. Mm. And I think do the work to become the best raw version of yourself. That there's no one looking. It's because your kids are going to remember all that stuff. Yeah. And do the work. It's hard. But if you really want to give them, an advantage in this world, be mentally stable as possible, be emotionally intelligent as possible, be transparent, be vulnerable, be expressive,
Be aware.
Be emotional.
Yes.
Safely, but
of course.
but I think that's the biggest thing for me. And I think I'm happy I haven't had kids yet, because now I'm like, okay, yeah, I can have some children, and
Yes.
when they're, I can help them, and I can shift, and I can pivot, and I can really create some beautiful human beings when it comes to just like internally beautiful. And I think that comes from grace and releasing shame and guilt, because that's heavy.
It is.
And if you don't feel it, your kid's gonna feel it. So you need to feel yours, because you don't want your kids feeling nothing that have nothing to do with them. So I guess that was a long.
No, that was perfect.
That's what I think about when I think about how am I going to help be a ladder and lift my children up, and that's just by simply healing.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful because it's all, you grow up hearing, oh, you have kids to like check off some box because you're supposed to have kids, but to say, I want to have children because I want to impart this beauty and this safety in them so that they can go and be, these incredible human beings. That's beautiful. We should all be so lucky to have that, to be able to say, like, this is what I can give to my children. Yeah. And to even comparing it to this, this financial, yes, you see a financial planner. Think about the amount of work you put into setting yourself up financially, setting your family up financially, and the pressure you put on yourself to do that, but not taking care of yourself.
Like not noticing your habits, noticing your patterns.
Absolutely.
Because your kids are going to notice them, and like they said, the story about the alcoholic father, like the twins, I don't know if they were twins, but they were brothers. One brother became an alcoholic and one brother didn't. And then you asked them both, why did you turn out the way you did? And they said, oh, because my father was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So that is a big part, I think, that people need to realize. Like, as a parent, you're going to imprint. So imprint some good stuff.
And there's a lot of things you won't have control of, but that you do.
You do. You really do.
You absolutely do.
Yeah.
Well, this was absolutely fantastic.
It was great.
Thank you so much for coming on here and for sharing and being open and raw and giving us some of that.
Hey, it is what it is.
Just like you said, we have to do that in order to move forward.
Yeah. So, thank you for having me. I was great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And thank y'all so much for listening.